I had the honor to interview Catherine Miller. She is truly the epitome of a power transformation. While she is a health and wellness guru and expert, from being a Reiki and yoga instructor to teaching about trauma informed practices and mindfulness, Catherine herself experienced a severe medical diagnosis that changed her entire world. And she has used that to continue being a light to so many people who experience darkness in so many different areas of their life. But Catherine is resilient. Catherine is strong. Catherine has implemented her own techniques in her own life so that she is thriving. And so I am so overjoyed today to have Catherine Miller as my guest on the Power Transformation podcast. And she is going to share how she came back through such a challenging situation and how she now helps others make their life better. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Power Transformation Podcast. I am so excited that you have joined me today. I am your host, Alethea Felton. And if it is your first time joining us for this podcast, I welcome you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I mean that. It is because of you that I have such faithful listeners and people who are actually incorporating what my guests are sharing so that they can place it into their own lives and find their bit of strength, find their bit of how to make improvements in their own life, and to know that everybody has a story to share. I also thank you for keeping this as a top 5% podcast. I know I say it quite often, but I want you to understand the importance of it. And it is because with podcasts now being a dime a dozen and so many different topics out there, this podcast is a movement, meaning that it is really speaking to ordinary people, regardless of what your job title is. This is speaking to people and explaining the human experience. We all have something valuable and insightful that we can share about our own lives. And that is what this show is all about, is how everyday people, whether you are a CEO or perhaps someone who lives at home and works from home or is a stay-at-home parent, it doesn't matter your profession. What matters is how you chose to take an obstacle in your life and you have come back even stronger and greater and more resilient from it. And my guest today does exactly that. And so I want to get right into this interview with Catherine Miller today. But I thank you who are new, as well as all of my faithful listeners. And so much is happening with the show that I'm going to be sharing in the near future. We're going to go ahead and start with our affirmation. I'll say it once, and then you repeat it. I embrace the power of holistic healing to transform my challenges into personal growth and wellness. Okay, y'all, I am so happy today to have Catherine Miller here. She is a holistic healer, Reiki practitioner, just as I told you, but so much more. And you are going to see her light shine through. And Catherine, I am so glad to have you on the Power Transformation Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
You are so welcome. So, this is what I like to do first. I always like to have a fun icebreaker question, a random question, something so that we can just get to know you more. Okay, this is your question. Catherine, if you were a late night talk show host, who would be one of your first guests? Doesn't have to be the first, but one of your first guests that you would want to interview and why?
Oh, my mom. I'm going to
Oh,
interview my mom.
tell us more.
I just think my mom is the most amazing person. A lot of the stuff I do now is because she either introduced me to it or kind of was just very supportive of me doing this stuff. And she's really funny. And we get along so well. And I think it would be just cool to interview her and have her talk about her story and, even her experience with things like that. Yeah.
Wow. I love hearing that because sometimes we've heard of, and I've even had a couple of guests who haven't had the best relationships with their mother, and they are women like us. And I think a mother daughter relationship is so important. I'm
Yeah.
so close to my mom. And you're right. It's just a different feeling that you get knowing you have this other woman who is your mom. But in my adulthood, I can speak for myself. It's like mom has also become a friend. And I don't
Yes.
say that in a
Yes.
disrespectful way, but yes, she has become my friend. And so I am so glad that you said that. And I know that your mom is going to be listening to this or even watching it. So shout out to your mom for
Shout out,
being
Mama. Shout out,
phenomenal.
Mama.
Yes, that's a great way to start. So, with that being said, Catherine, if someone were to ask you randomly, not knowing that you were Catherine Miller, but
Mhm.
said, "Who is Catherine Miller?"
Ooh.
What would you say?
Ah, I'm still figuring that out. Aren't we all? Um,
Yeah.
um, let's see. But I guess more in line with, what we're going to talk about today. Um, I would
It can
say
be now,
anything.
it can be anything. It doesn't have to be in alignment.
I would probably say someone who just experienced different things and by choice, but also just the way life unfolded, like it prepared me for who I am now and the things I do now, which kind of, I think, makes those experiences, it like adds more beauty to them because you kind of see the purpose in, why you may have had certain experiences. For me, it was
Mhm.
different surgeries or kind of ailments. Um, and at the time, it felt like, oh, this just sucks, right? Oh, I'm having
Yeah.
surgery. I'm having this. And now it's kind of like, oh, that brought me some knowledge and wisdom and stuff for what I do now.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
Catherine, just from me knowing a little bit about your backstory, I'm telling you, the things you've experienced, a lot of people would have quit, but you
Mm.
actually didn't. And that leads me to this next question about the fact that you even said it, but you have faced, Catherine, significant health challenges from a young age, including surgeries and also something specifically that happened that I know that you are going to talk about, but let's kind of go back some and just share how these health challenges and experiences actually shaped your perspective on health and wellness
Mm.
and how they actually influence or pave the way for your journey into holistic health and healing. So it's a loaded question, but take it any way that you like to.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, I had some surgeries, and this was all prior to kind of my understanding of things from a more holistic perspective. Um, so I danced growing up and absolutely loved dance. Like it was my life. Ballet was my life. I thought I would be a prima ballerina. I wanted to be a prima ballerina. It wasn't cut out for me, but I have like hypermobility issues. And so through that, I actually injured myself and had to have both my hips operated on in high
Wow.
school. And so not only was it the physical pain, but it was also, something I had done since I was 2 years old. And then when you stop doing that, right, you identify, like my identity, I think, was so tied to what I did
Mhm.
that then when I couldn't anymore, or it was the source of this pain, it also affected me emotionally and mentally, right? And when you're in high school, when you're a teenager, you're going through puberty, right? Your everything's changing hormonally. It really just felt for me like I think it really affected me more on an emotional level.
Mhm.
Looking back on it now, than I think probably people had anticipated. Um, and then there had also been some other things around like nutrition and dietary changes I'd had to make several years prior. So it felt like all of these it felt in a lot of ways like my body was turning against me. Like my
Mm.
body and I were at odds with each other. That's what it felt like for a long time. Like I didn't get along with my body, or my body wasn't supporting me. And through that, however, um, I slowly started to, find other ways that I could help my body, right? So dietary, like when it came to diet, um, I had told my mom that I wanted to become a vegetarian, and I was pretty young. I was already pretty small, weight wise, and so she said, "Okay, you still have to eat fish, but I'll do this with you." And as we went through this, we kind of realized, oh, we're not eating a lot of vegetable, right? We're vegetarians, but we're not eating a lot of vegetables.
Oh.
And so we started to explore food. And so we'd get magazines, right? And we'd read up on them. And my mom grew up, her parents were farmers. So she was familiar with things, but it kind of was almost like us diving deep into, oh, this food is beneficial for this, right? Or what if we try this recipe? So it definitely kind of expanded some things that we cooked, and we kind of just became, I would say, like I kind of became my own guinea pig through that, right? It
Uh-huh.
was like, oh, let's try
Yeah.
this recipe, right? Let's experiment with this. My mom is always big about experimenting, like in the kitchen when we're cooking. And so I think that was really helpful, because then later on down the line, when I had some other surgeries, right, it was like, oh, hey, we read about this, right? Maybe we can use food, for a healing purpose, not just because it tastes good. Um, and then even with my hip surgeries, right, it was kind of like pivoting to, um, okay, other ways that the body can move, right? So
Mhm.
I was hypermobile. So even though my mom had introduced me to yoga and we'd done it on and off over the years, it became more of, okay, yoga can be beneficial because it can help build the strength that my body didn't have, right? And then I also got introduced to acupuncture. And so that was looking more at things from an energetic perspective,
Mhm.
right? And being able to, I think, put words to things that I had felt, but I didn't have the language for as it related to Western medicine. And
Yes.
this is right. And this is not to say Western medicine is bad. Like I've trusted my surgeons literally with my life, and they have been wonderful. But it gave other language to, I'm feeling a certain way, but if I go tell a doctor, they may not have the answer. And with my acupuncturist, I could explain something to her, and she would be able to say, oh, your energy, might be deficient here, or it might be
Mhm.
because, it might be affecting your sleep in these ways. And so it almost made me feel like, I actually know what I'm talking about, right? Like my
Yep.
body and I are communicating, and it helped me to kind of learn how to communicate a little bit more with my body. So all of this was kind of going on, basically from maybe like elementary school into high school,
Wow.
like all
Pretty
of these
much
different things.
a lot of your childhood, you were going
Yeah.
through a lot. And I know that you talk about the hip surgeries and things of that nature and how your body seemed to be fighting against you. Out of all of these challenges you had, either in childhood or even in your younger adulthood, what do you think was one of the most, not to say they weren't serious, but what do you think was the one that was the most life altering for you, and
Oh,
how did you navigate through that?
yeah. So I did actually have a third surgery right before college, but the most altering one was, a couple years after I graduated college. Um, I I had brain surgery.
Mm.
So I had headaches, or I think migraines. I'd had probably, I think maybe around age 16 or so. I would get like a really bad migraine about once a year. And in
Wow.
college, they might become a little more frequent, so maybe it was twice a year. And I would go to sleep, I'd wake up, I'd feel better. But it was always in the same spot.
Mm.
And I told my parents, I kind of told friends, like, I think there might be something going on, but my parents didn't want me to be a hypochondriac, so they're like, everything's okay, you're okay.
Mhm.
And it was in the fall of 2013. The headaches started to become more and more frequent. And sometimes even when I would go to sleep, they wouldn't go away.
Mm.
Um, and so I had just recently moved out of my parents' house. And I was, spending more time hanging out with friends. I'd actually started taking up dancing once more. And I was so afraid to tell them because I was afraid that they would tell me, oh, you're doing too much, right? You just need more sleep, cut back on
Yeah.
all the stuff you're doing.
Mhm.
And I started having these episodes where if I was reading something or even listening, like I remember one time being at work, being on the phone with someone, like with a client, and the words that they were saying were jumbled in my head as I was understanding them.
Interesting.
And same when I would read, it was like the word, I would have these moments, whether it lasted 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer, where when I would look at the words, they would all just look jumbled in my mind. So just out of order. And then
Wow.
it would go away. So, of course my thought is, oh my goodness, I must really be tired. I really must be tired.
Mhm.
But it started to all happen more and more frequently. And then I was coming back from a meeting with my director, who I worked very, very closely with. And he asked me a question about a client, a partner that we worked with. And I went to answer, and no words came out of my mouth.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and I remember just kind of being like, what is going on? It's a very weird sensation to go to talk and you just can't talk.
So let me ask you, does it mean that in your mind you knew the words that you wanted to say,
Mhm.
but when you tried to articulate them, your tongue wouldn't move, your vocal cord didn't react, you're
Yeah.
just literally just can't speak?
Hmm. Like my mouth is open,
Yeah.
but it's as if I'm talking, I was talking to you
Mhm.
right now as I was talking to him, and then he asked a question and I just opened my mouth and it was
Oh my goodness.
just dead silence. And it's very weird to explain because I kept thinking like, Catherine, talk,
Yeah.
talk.
Exactly.
But nothing came out. And so he was like, okay. He actually, I remember he said to me, that's weird. He's like, let me ask you a
Oh.
simpler question.
Uh-huh.
Because it was just such a weird interaction. And then I was able to talk again. So I went and called my parents.
My
And,
goodness.
my mom was saying, you should go make an appointment with your primary care physician. She
Mom
said,
knows best.
mom knows
Yeah.
best. She said, call your
Uh-huh.
PCP. And then she said, I'll also call our acupuncturist because again, she'd been seeing me for years. And so she was very
Mhm.
familiar with me. And as the day went on, I started to get a really bad headache again. So I went to see
Oh.
her and she was trained as a Western nurse. So of course
Oh.
I really appreciated her perspective as well because she understood things both from a Western and Eastern medical perspective. And
Mhm.
she flashed a little light in my eye and, said, follow the light. And she said, you need to go see a neurologist. She said, your left eye is sluggish. She said, I can treat your headache tonight, but
Mm.
you need to go see a neurologist. There's something that's wrong. So she treated me. I got in to see maybe my PCP like a day or two later. And I explained everything. And, I will just kind of use this opportunity to also say, really make sure that people, for those who are listening, to advocate for yourself because my doctor did not listen to me. They
Mm.
said, "Oh, you must have caught a virus, when you went to go visit your friend in New York because I rode a bus." And I kept saying, I had these symptoms prior to that. It's not a virus. There is something that is wrong. And I really had to fight for myself. I remember getting so upset because I'm thinking, I know my body better than anyone does.
Mhm.
It's not a virus. um, and so they were like, okay, fine. You know what? I'll write up a referral for you to get an MRI. And I kind of felt like they did it to kind of just essentially shut me up,
Mhm.
to prove me wrong. And so then the following week, I think it was the following week, I went and had my MRI. And later on that afternoon, they called and actually they called my primary care physician, who then called me, and she called to say, you have a brain tumor.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, I told you something was wrong, right? I was
Mhm.
kind of like, no, duh, there's something going on.
Mhm.
And that just turned into about, I think it was about 3 weeks of appointments, being hooked up to things. And on my first appointment with my neurosurgeon, he walked in and said, "You're going to have an awake craniotomy on this date."
Oh my gosh.
And I
Oh.
said, "Oh, I said, I'm not going to be awake." I said, "I've had surgeries before. I'm not going to be awake." And he said, "You're going to be awake. You need to be awake." So I fought him a couple more times and then
Mhm.
I conceded. But they needed to, essentially what happened is I had a tumor. While it's not cancerous, it's common in children and young adults, but it had grown enough to a size that it was pressing on a part of my brain that was affecting my like communication.
Which is why you couldn't speak that day.
Exactly. And so I
Oh.
needed to be awake because they needed to make sure that they only cut out the brain tumor and not the part of the brain which helped with my speech, or else I could lose the ability to speak or have my speech affected. And brain
Catherine,
tumor looks like brain matter. So yeah.
so I don't mean to cut you off,
Mhm.
and I want you to pick up here, but just a quick clarifying question. In that moment when your doctor calls you and says you have a brain tumor, take us back to that initial reaction that you have, especially after
Mhm.
you get off of the phone. How are you feeling? What's going through your mind? Take us to that real raw moment. Was it
Yeah.
shock? Was it worry? Was it fear? Was it chill and calm? Was it all of the above? Take us there.
So it was kind of both things. And I will also just
Mhm.
say I was because of past MRIs that I'd had,
Mhm.
I would feel a little claustrophobic. So they had prescribed me Valium,
Mhm.
and I was sleeping to kind of get that out of my system. So I will say, right, that was a little bit in my system. So I think I was probably a little more calm. So
Yes.
I do want to say that.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was twofold. I felt part of me actually felt validated for once. That
Because you told them.
I told them I've been, saying like something's wrong. Like nobody, at least to me, I was like, why am I only having a headache in this one part? It's always stemming from this one part of my head. And then there's still the like, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor.
Mhm.
People talk, I kind of feel like there are the more, uh, I want to say this in, I think there's other ailments or conditions or things that are talked about more frequently, but I
Mhm.
had always felt like as soon as you hear brain tumor, people jump to the absolute worst,
They sure do. Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And it was also, all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I need to pay a whole lot more attention to my brain because
Mhm.
all this stuff is happening. And I mean, there was one time my dad was driving me to an appointment and I was like, I think I just had a seizure. And I remember he looked so scared while driving because all this can be going on, right? And nobody has any idea what's going on inside of you.
Mhm.
Like it just felt like such also a total loss of control. So it was this like, oh, finally I have an answer, right? I knew I was right, like my intuition was right. And at the same time, what does this look like?
Mhm.
Like what's going to happen? So I think it was mixed feelings at the same time because I did call my parents. I called them on the phone because I was like, I'm still kind of recovering from this Valium.
Yes.
I couldn't get out of bed. And they came in and I told them, and you know, I think I just remember the look on my dad's face was kind of like that fear,
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and then there was also the like, I think it was also seeing their reaction was then like, okay, I'm validated, but also this is scary. I had been used to hip, hip surgeries, which weren't super invasive, or I
Mhm.
had another surgery on my jaw. Like those are a little less invasive. This is your brain.
Exactly. And even when we had our pre-call, although we kept it surface level because
Mhm.
I didn't want to go as in depth, I think I shared with you, especially when you told me it wasn't cancerous, is because I had a cousin, one of my first cousins when I was about 13, died of a brain tumor, but it was
Mm,
cancerous. And I
mhm.
think sometimes people can default automatically and think if you have a tumor or a mass in your brain that is automatically cancerous, and that's not
Right.
always the case.
No,
And I think
it's not.
sometimes that's what causes a person's reaction is because they automatically hear brain tumor, think cancer, think, oh my goodness, she's about to die, even if
Yeah.
it's not spoken. But even if it's not cancerous, I think it's important to point out it's still serious. This is
Yeah.
serious business. So it
Yes.
doesn't matter whether it's malignant or not. They're telling you that they need to do brain surgery while you're awake. What was the rationale for you being awake as
Mhm.
opposed to sleeping?
Yeah. So the brain tumor looks just like your brain matter.
Oh
And
my.
so they have to
Okay.
make sure that they, at least that the way that they explained it to me,
Uh-huh.
they have to make sure that they cut out the tumor and not the brain matter.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, so that was so I had to be awake for them to essentially they poked around in my brain.
Mhm.
And I mean, we can kind of jump ahead to
Yeah.
that part if you want.
How did that feel?
It doesn't
I know
hurt.
that you were numb, but how,
Well, your
right?
your brain doesn't feel pain. So
Oh, that's right.
I was
Okay.
asleep for them to cut through my skull. And then they wake you up and it feels like a sponge, honestly. It feels like a squishy sponge. It really
Oh
like
my
the way
gosh.
when you look at what a brain looks like, it to me it feels the way you would imagine it feels.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
fascinating.
so the downside was when you have been under anesthesia, usually it takes people a bit of a while to come to.
Mhm.
They immediately were like, okay, I need you to count to 10. And so you're just woken up, right? I remember it's cold in the OR. There's a lot of things. I was so afraid to move my head. I felt like saline. I thought it was blood, but it was saline, because they have to
Okay.
keep everything sterile. And they just immediately are like, okay, start counting to 10. And I was like, I'm trying to catch my breath. I'm trying to like, where am I? What's going on? And it's like count to 10. So I counted to 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I could feel them pressing on different areas. So they said, okay, count to 10 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. I'm like trying to get it out in one breath because my
Mhm.
body is still like, you have been under anesthesia. And so they kept doing that until they came to the part that they did not want to remove, right? Which affected my speech. And when I did that, when I counted to 10, it essentially I was like 1, 2, 3, 4. I remember my tongue,
Oh,
I couldn't control moving. And then I was like, oh my, like I'm in my mind thinking, oh my gosh. And they're like, okay, count to 10 again. So it was a lot at once.
that's kind of creepy and
It is crazy.
fascinating all at
I mean,
once.
now that I'm on the other side, all right, I'm like, it's kind of cool, that they
Yeah.
could press on something and your tongue,
Mhm.
your everything just kind of loses control. But it was also in the moment, I just remember being like, "Ah, I just want my mommy.
Uh-huh.
I need my mommy to hold my hand in here."
Yes.
And it was just, they were like, okay, keep doing it, keep going. Because of course they, were concerned, they're in there to do a job. And I had
Mhm.
such a wonderful surgeon, such a wonderful neurosurgeon, neurologist. The medical team
Wonderful.
was amazing. Even I will shout out one of my nurses. She was a Black
Yes.
female nurse. She braided my hair so that I mean, you can see
Oh.
I got a lot of hair, so they didn't have to shave off
Mhm.
all my hair. I only lost like a little strip of it.
Oh,
Like
good.
they really did take so many things into consideration,
Yeah.
before all of this. I had had a functional MRI. They had done so much to make sure that I was prepared and that they knew what they were going in to
Mhm.
see. And I'm extremely grateful for that because I also know that there are a lot of people who are not able to be seen within the
Mhm.
short amount of time that I was. A lot of people have to wait longer. And it's still, though, nothing prepares you for being on a operating table with your skull open.
That's right. I mean, nothing.
No, there is
Wow.
nothing. And at one point they left because they so it was a biopsy and craniotomy, right? The goal was to be able to remove it all if possible.
Mm-hmm.
But they went to check out the biopsy, and I was by myself on the table. And then that just felt like an eternity.
Yeah.
Um, because you're
How
just by
long were you
yourself.
by yourself?
I don't know. I mean, part of
Okay.
me feels like maybe it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 20. I really
Mm-hmm.
don't remember. At one point, I did ask a nurse to come hold my hand. And so she did, I think it was a female nurse. She did for a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And then she was like, I'm so sorry. Like, I need to go back to, to my
Mm-hmm.
post or whatever in the OR. And so then you're just alone again. And I just started praying, right? Because you're just kind of there like, the only way out is through.
Mm, mm,
The only way out is through, and you just wait. And,
mm.
you just trust that everything's okay, right? You trust that that's saline and not blood, like,
Sh-
but it was one of
that's-
those moments
mm,
where, and that had also been my feeling going into this whole surgery was, and I think I told you in the pre-call, like I had this one-on-one talk with God,
mhm,
where I had said, like, I don't know how this is going to end up. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what this is all, what's going to come from
mhm.
all this, but I can't, I have no control over it. So just whatever you want to happen.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible. And during this time, especially for you to have been so young and experiencing all of these challenges, Catherine, how in the world did you maintain your resilience throughout all of these challenges?
I mean, I feel like you could sometimes, it's, you really don't have an option, I think.
Mm,
Um, I think also, I had, especially during this, my mama called her community. She called everybody, told all of
mhm.
them. So I had people praying for me across the country.
That's right.
And I think the fact that just knowing that at every appointment, one of my parents was with me, my brothers were calling, like, I think while it does not make it less scary, it just makes it a little easier to just know that someone is there, with
Yeah.
you, right? That, like, because also what was happening is they put me on anti-seizure medication because essentially those episodes I was having a focal seizure. And um went on anti-seizure medication, which stopped the seizures in the time
Mhm.
between the diagnosis and the surgery. Um, but it affected things like my hair falling out, although I still have a lot of hair, so nobody could tell except my mom was the only one who really knew. But it
Mhm.
also was affecting things like my memory. So sometimes it was just nice where, like, my mom could kind of make up for the slack where if I would forget
Mhm.
something either during that time period or even afterwards in my recovery.
Yes.
Because, going through a surgery, going through a procedure, going even just getting that diagnosis, it's exhausting. I think a lot of times people forget, when you have to go to all these appointments, right? Answer all these questions, do all these tests. Mentally and emotionally, that weighs on you as
Mhm.
well, right? That sometimes is also what can affect, in my opinion, like, how people fare. And so
That's true.
having someone who's
That's
there with
proven.
you, right?
Mhm.
Who's like, oh no, you know, eh, she experienced this the other day, right? Or she felt this. It's like, oh, I was just like, God bless my mother. I was like, thank goodness I have someone who essentially like knows my health history
Yes.
and can answer, right, and fill in those gaps, because I think that did make it just a little bit easier,
Mhm.
right? So that I could focus on, just all of the emotions that are coming up, because while everyone else is still scared, that you're going through this, that you're having this, and you're also kind of having to navigate their emotions, right? And what they're
Mhm.
feeling and reassuring them, you're still like, okay, at the end of the day, it's not like I can bring my parents into the OR with me, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just you. And
That's
so
right.
you realize it's like, I would never wish this on anyone, but you realize, okay, I can go through something significant, right? And even if it takes me a long time to heal from, right? Or it, in my case, kind of introduced me to other things and like kind of changed the trajectory. Um, you kind of do realize that you do have this strength, and you also have something for me to look back on 10 years later, right? Like I was just telling a friend, and I've talked about it with my mom. Sometimes when things overwhelm me, my mom will be like, okay, but you made it through an awake craniotomy. And it kind of
Mhm.
is like, oh yeah, I did. Like this pales in comparison, right? Like it
Yeah.
may still be significant, but I know that I can make it through.
Wow. And the fact that you not only made it through, Catherine, but you just didn't keep your blessing to yourself,
Mhm.
so as to speak. And you are open about talking about how, yes, your mom helped to craft and helped you pave this wellness journey, but also your bond with your grandmother
Mm,
also was a huge part of it. So I want to take a shift in a sense to ask you specifically about that. You mentioned to me offline about your grandmother, and that when she transitioned, in a sense, that it gave you that nudge or extra boost you needed to pursue your path. So how did the experience of loss and transition deepen your understanding of life, and also how did it help to influence what you do now in order to help others?
yeah. Um, so this was actually about a year, just a little over a year, before I found out I had the brain tumor.
Mhm.
Actually, so both of my dad's parents passed within 9 months of each other, so in the same
Mm,
year. Um, and while his father's passing was sudden, my my grandmother, she had kind of just started to, I would say, kind of deteriorate. I mean,
mm,
that was her, that was her husband of for nearly 60 years. Like
yeah.
that's a huge loss. And um we had spoken to her. She had kind of started to like things really started to shift later on in that year, so 2012. And I remember we spoke with her, and my dad had said, we're going to come up to visit you tomorrow. So we drove up the next day because, it sounded pretty serious. And um, I love this memory so much.
Mm,
Dad had said, we're coming to see you. I remember we parked the car. My dad ran into the house. He ran to her room by her bedside, and I remember her shifting her gaze to him, and he said, "Hi, mom, it's me." Um, and he gave her permission. He said, "Whenever you're ready to go, you can." He gave her permission to transition, and it was so beautiful to see her wait for him. And they say this a lot when people are starting to transition, right? They will hold on sometimes for
mhm,
a person, right? Like they need to say their goodbyes. And so he kind of walked her through that. And well, I think she fell into a coma for a few days.
mm,
And so we were bedside for her last few days, and started to see her body transition, right? The organs starting to shut down. And
mm,
um, my dad would say different prayers for her,
mm.
as someone starting to transition. And I remember the night before she passed, I had this very real dream. The only thing I can think of is maybe I don't even want to call it a premonition, but it was one
Mhm.
of those where when I woke up from it, I thought it had actually happened. And basically I
Wow.
had seen her kind of come in like this very new, revitalized body. But it was just something about it, like I was there with her. It wasn't just a dream. Yeah. So I remember I woke up crying because I was like, what just happened? I ran down, and of course she was still in bed. And so it just really freaked me out. But later on that afternoon, we went to say the rosary by her bedside.
Mhm,
And as we were saying it, we got towards the end of the prayer, And I remember my aunt started saying like this litany. I think it was my grandmother's favorite litany. And it almost looked like my grandmother's mouth started to move.
Wow.
I think the line was like Jesus pray for us or something or
Mm.
and I just remember everybody so it was my dad's two sisters, my mom, my dad, and me. We all stood up. And again, I remember feeling so overwhelmed. Um, and they all just started to say goodbye to her. And it's actually making me start to tear up thinking about it. So one of my aunts kept saying the prayer, and I remember my mom and my dad being like, we love you, Graham. You say hi to granddad for us. Um,
Oh, how beautiful.
and I remember it looked like a tear came out of her eye. And I remember I'm very emotional and I cry at
Yeah,
everything, as you can tell. I remember my mom came over because I was literally about to
that's
like
okay.
lose
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And it was just something about it's hard to describe, right? But seeing someone pass away, and especially in such a beautiful way, like kind of really inspires you to look back at your own life, right? I think a lot of times when people experience death or loss or something, like an ailment or a condition
Hmm.
or a surgery, it kind of has you reevaluate your own life, right? Like,
It
what am I
does.
doing, right? Am I
Hmm.
living? Oh my goodness. I'm like not crying now, but it still sounds like I
That's
am.
okay. That's okay, girl. Just be you.
um,
It's fine, honey.
I tell people I literally cry at everything though. It can be something happy. It's like,
That's
oh my gosh,
okay.
there's a butterfly outside my window, right? I'm like bawling. But it just kind of really has you look back at your life, right? And like when I think the question I really started to ask myself is when I get to the end of my life, right? What do I want it to look like?
Mm.
And I think in seeing my grandmother, right? Um, having her loved ones around her, right? Having people pray by her bedside, having people who knew, oh, this is, her favorite prayer, right? But then also, I think it just really had me look at there were a lot of ways where I think I was very scared and kept saying, oh, I'll put it off, right? Oh, I'll put it off. I'll do that later. And I just kind of felt like I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and because I've dealt with things, like anxiety and depression and just being a little fearful. Um, and so that in its own way kind of opened me up to like I think I want to start doing the things I've been saying I was going to do but kept putting off. And so
Hmm.
with that I think as I mentioned earlier, like my mom had introduced me to yoga as a young child and I'd done it on and off, but I was like, Mama, I think I want to get my yoga teacher certification. And maybe a month or two, not maybe it was actually like a month later, I remember I walked into my parents' bedroom and my mom said, I think I found the perfect program for you.
Mm.
And the deadline was approaching. Like I think the deadline was in a couple of weeks. And so I scrounged, to fill out the application. It happened to be I did my training through the Kripalu Center.
Hmm.
But they were doing an off-site training at a studio that was like a 15-20 minute drive from my parents' house.
Okay.
And um, and it just it felt like one of those moments where everything aligned so perfectly. Like I don't believe in coincidences, but it felt like
I don't either. Yeah.
everything just aligned so perfectly. It came at the exact right time. And so I completed my training a couple months before they told me I had a brain tumor, right? And I also don't think that that was a coincidence because it was like I'd kind of had all of these new things I could add into my toolbox, right? My mom and I had already talked a lot about nutrition. And one of the other things I was actually going to do was apply for my nutrition program, but I had like maybe just missed the deadline.
Mm.
And around that time was then when I found out I had a brain tumor, right? So it was like all of
Wow.
these things were starting to, like the
Yeah.
timing was starting to fall into place. Um, and yeah, so and then, as you had talked about, with Reiki, well, I
Hmm.
don't know if you want to ask the question, but even like that, the
Yeah.
timing of that happened.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't find that to be a coincidence either.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, so yes, you started this path of holistic healing, but the question for you is what compelled you to say, while yes, you wanted to become a yoga practitioner and you later got certified in Reiki, what was it specifically where you came to the point to say, I want to help others with this?
Mhm. I think it was, I mean, I really think it was also the surgery. So I think my grandmother's
Okay.
passing, but also the brain surgery in particular. I think it was, I remember in my when I came home, my mom had me get on a schedule.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just all the ways that I was seeing, like, the things that I had learned, I used in my healing, right? Even if I remember one time I did yoga after my surgery, just a little bit of movement. It probably, I don't think I did more than 10 or 15 minutes. And I feel like I was barely moving because I was just so
Mm,
tired, right? But it got me moving again, right? I knew how to use my breath for certain things. I ate a lot of Indian food, actually, and it helped a lot with the inflammation. I came in to get the staples removed from my head, and my surgeon was like, or his team was like, "You look great. What have you been
wow.
doing?"
Uh-huh.
um, but I think what I had still had this feeling of like a cloud over my head where the tumor had been, and so I had Reiki performed on me, and it was just so transformative that yet again it was like the doctor said there's nothing wrong, right? We've done all we
Okay.
could, but someone else could just feel and sense something, that there was something else energetically.
Hmm.
And I don't know, there was something about it that was like, first of all, this is so cool. I have to learn about it. And as I did my training with my mom and I did our level 1 and level 2 trainings together.
I love it.
I That's what I say. We're like, she's my little partner in crime with this stuff. Or
Yeah.
I'm her, or I'm
Yeah.
hers. She'll be like, hey, come try this with me. And I'm like, okay. Um, I just felt like, oh, this could be so helpful to so many people. Um, and my parents have always been people who've been about service. They were like for everything. And I just thought I had I had a much easier experience than a lot of people do,
Hmm.
right? It does not take away from what I experienced, but what if I were to use this to give back to other people?
Yeah,
Like I said, it
exactly.
it it makes what you went through more special. And it kind of it gave me more of a purpose because I
Hmm.
actually went back to the hospital where I'd had my surgery at and was doing Reiki, not just with patients who'd had brain tumors, but all across the hospital for patients, for their family members, for medical staff,
Hmm.
and it really made such a difference. Like we helped so much with things like pain, um, treated like thousands. I think it was over 8,000 patients over a span of like
Ooh,
15 years, granted. So I came in later on in
amazing.
the program.
Yeah.
Um, but they were able to help decrease pain without medication. Um, Also, with things around like anxiety,
Yeah.
depression, grief. So we kind of came in as like a de-escalation team, and there were other volunteers as well. But it was just such a fulfilling experience because I would come, after a long day at the office, and sometimes, my mind would say, "Oh, I would so much rather go home and, lay on my
Hmm.
couch and binge watch a show." But then you'd encounter someone, right, who may have been having one of the worst days in their life, and
Hmm.
to be able to help them sleep, right, or to be able to help, maybe a mom who, a pregnant, you know, mom who, um, was maybe having a difficult pregnancy, right? And to
Hmm.
bring her even, 10 minutes of relief or relaxation. Or I was also working with the med psych unit. And um, one of the greatest compliments I ever got, even if the person didn't mean for it to be a compliment, was, they said that they had lived on the street most of their lives. They were homeless, a homeless individual. And so when you're out on the street, you kind of, are very suspicious of a lot of people
I'm sure.
because, right, for safety reasons. And
Hmm.
they said that they weren't sure how they were going to feel about, receiving Reiki, but they just said that they felt comfortable. They felt safe. They felt like they could let their guard down. And I just
So,
thought, oh my goodness, how beautiful.
so let me ask you this, and goodness knows we could have a whole episode
Yeah.
just on Reiki itself, but Give us the 30-second definition for anybody who might not know. People are familiar with yoga,
Mhm.
um, for the most part, but Reiki, yes, I know that they could Google it, but I want to do my part as the host. For a person that may have heard of the term Reiki, Reiki,
Mhm.
or never heard of it, could you just give us a very brief definition or explanation of what exactly Reiki is? Because it's becoming more and more popular now in Western society, although it's been out forever.
It has been around for
Yeah,
a long time, and energy practices as a whole, right, have been out
yeah.
for a long time. But it comes from Japan, and it means universal life force energy. So I like to explain, to when I teach classes, like when I teach Reiki classes, um, people who are familiar with yoga, right? The term for that life force energy is prana, or if you're familiar with acupuncture, right? People talk about their chi. So
Mhm,
just kind of if that makes it a little more relatable, but it is this very safe, gentle, like a non-intrusive healing technique that you can use for yourself, you can use on other people, even plants and animals. It can people have used it on their plants and sometimes can do better.
mm,
But it's really good about helping to balance and heal and harmonize the body, mind, emotions, and spirit. So it's not just physical. It initially had more of like a spiritual purposes, but
mhm,
it works on all these different levels of our being, right? And we are not just one, we're not just our physical self, right? And a lot of times, even if something maybe hurting one part of our body, right? We are still this whole unit. And so the body is
mhm,
going to compensate in all these different ways, and Reiki can help with that. So I will say most people oftentimes in my experience, feel like a sense of relaxation, or maybe if they're in pain, it can help with pain relief. But it can also help with other things like just feeling a sense of wholeness, better well being, even encouraging things like better self awareness,
mhm.
which can also help with like things like intuition, spiritual development, or personal growth. But I think, especially along the lines when I said self awareness, as I talked about earlier, right? Like I felt like my body and I were at odds, like we were two different entities. And now I feel like my body talks to me all the time. Feel very, much more
Yeah,
self aware and kind of sometimes understanding or just getting those cues. And so sometimes with Reiki, people might start to kind of have a better understanding,
mhm.
maybe of what is going on. People also
Exactly.
have other experiences too, but I would say those tend to be some of the most common ones.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. And while a lot of this interview really was to focus on your journey of really overcoming a lot of
Mhm.
obstacles, as we start to bring this to a close, I don't want to end it without you sharing the fact that you are a full-time entrepreneur with your own business, in this arena of healing. So, if a person wanted to get services from you or learn more about what you do, tell us just a little bit about that and how they can connect with you.
Sure. Yes. So I do. So I'll say specifically as it relates to Reiki. So I work at a studio. It's started by Mara Benner. So she actually it's her studio, but I work with her doing Reiki
Okay.
services. It's called Four Directions Wellness. So FOUR Directions Wellness. We're based in Northern Virginia. But we have virtual Reiki, we have in person and virtual Reiki classes, so level one, level two, and Reiki master. Um, and I also work with clients, so one on one Reiki sessions with clients. These can be done actually in person or virtually as well. Reiki can be done from a distance.
I never knew that.
Yeah, a
Reiki
lot of
can be
people,
done virtually?
it can be. A lot of people are, I
What?
will say, are skeptical of it because, they are like, how does it work? It does. But
Oh my
a lot
goodness.
of people do prefer in person, which is fine too.
Yeah.
Um, and so with level one, we introduce people to this practice. They work a lot on themselves. So they do a self-care practice using Reiki. Um, learn about the history, right? Learn how to work on other individuals. And then in Reiki too, we just delve a little bit deeper into, how this would look as a professional, right? As you kind of, if you want to take on this role as a professional Reiki
Mhm.
practitioner, just kind of, again, delving deeper into these practices, ways to use Reiki. And then Reiki master training goes even further into that, with, again, different applications, tapping a lot more into your intuition, because Reiki can help
Mhm.
to strengthen your intuition. And then you also learn some, things like how to teach Reiki, right? How to kind of take on this same role. But it is probably one of my favorite things to do. I just um to just see all the different ways that you can help
Mhm.
someone, and at the same time, right? I think especially in our society, right, we're often told, oh, you have to do all this stuff, and Reiki kind of helps us to come back to,
Mhm.
you can also just be, right? And you can receive this whatever it is, right? And it can help you become more fully yourself.
Wow.
But yeah, so Four Directions Wellness, you can find us online at fourdirectionswellness.com. From there, if you want to reach out via email, right, we can answer questions, set up a free consultation. Um, and then on, I think, Instagram, it's the number four. So the number four Directions
Mhm.
Wellness. But definitely check out our website. If you have any further questions for me, I'll get a message and I can uh, communicate with folks that way. But
Yes,
hopefully this has been
indeed.
helpful for people.
Of
And
course, it definitely has. And Catherine, as a closing question, for someone that's watching or listening, you have definitely, especially with all of the challenges that you faced and you've overcome, Catherine, what is a key piece of advice or wisdom or jewel that you would give someone who is currently struggling either with chronic health challenges or just life adversity? What would you tell them to do in order to start to begin to cultivate more of their own inner strength?
oh man, oh, that is such a good question.
Mm,
Um, well, one thing that comes to mind, and I spoke to it earlier, is leaning on your community. I know it sounds weird, because you asked about within themselves, but
mhm,
especially when you are going through it, everything can just feel so much harder. Ask for help, right? Like the people in your life who really love you and care for you, they will show up for you. And I was afraid to do that, right? Especially with my brain tumor. I was afraid to do that at first because I was so afraid, right? I'd be told, oh, you're going to have to stop doing all this stuff. But it just makes life a little bit easier, and it creates that space for you to then figure out, right, okay, what are the tools that I can use to help center me, to help ground me, right? Because I've done so many different things, right? Some days what I need is to do some yoga, right? I need to move my body. Other days what I need to do is I need to call a friend, or I need to call my mom, right? And just talk to someone, right? Just hear a loving voice. Other days I need to sit on my couch and binge watch a show, right? Or read a book. Some days I need to just be in prayer, right? We have all these different things, and figuring out those ones that really work for us is so important. But sometimes when we are really in the thick of it,
mhm,
it can seem so overwhelming, right? To even do one of those things. So ask for help, lean on your community. They will really come to support you. And then when you feel those moments of ease, again, this
mhm.
is just from my experience, then
Yeah.
use that to kind of tap into, okay, what helps me most in this moment? You do not have to get it right. And it is a lifelong journey to figure out whatever all these things are, right? So don't feel like, oh, I have to know it all today. You don't. Also, give yourself grace. That's, I think, probably the third
Yeah.
thing. Give yourself grace, because being hard on ourselves is not going to make it any easier either.
Mhm.
Be very gracious with yourself, be very loving with yourself, just as you would a small child, just as you would your best friend, right? A person that you love. Give yourself that same amount of grace and love and compassion as you're going through it. It to me, it even if it makes it 1% easier, just it
Mm.
makes it 1% easier. And that can make all the difference, especially on the hardest days.
Exactly. And I said that was the closing question, but this one definitely is gonna be it because it sparks one last question.
Mhm.
Catherine, if you had the chance, looking at all that you've experienced so far in life, the good, the bad, the ugly, but honey, you've come out on top. And I know and believe that you're going to continue coming out on top.
Thank
But if you could say anything to your grandmother about something that she gave you, if you could just have 30 seconds to talk to your grandma, what would you say to her?
Oh, okay. And for those who are not watching me, I just started to cry. Um, oh boy, I miss you so much, and
Mhm.
um, thank you for always praying for me.
Yep.
There have definitely been times where I think I have felt like somebody's prayers are certainly at work, and I am
Mhm.
very much convinced it is both of my grandmothers and my mother's. Um,
Mhm.
but sometimes where life did just, I don't know, it just feels like someone is praying,
Yes.
and
Yes. That's
she
right.
she and my grandfather like were very avid, like not avid, they regularly prayed. I know like all of
Mhm.
my grandparents did, but I just feel like in particular she had, I will always remember her very calming, loving voice.
Mhm.
Even when I messed up as a kid. Um, so yeah. So and I guess also
Yes.
with that, thank you. So
Mhm. And
oh
I can
man, that's
say,
a
yeah,
question. I'm a
yeah.
mess.
But I was going one of two ways, and I intentionally did that because I think it's so important, even with the tears and viewers and listeners alike, there's a saying that I learned when I was in grief counseling, and it says, "We grieve because we've loved." And it was one of the most beautiful statements, but also just you, Catherine, being a woman of faith. And I too, I think that your response was so timely because I believe personally, and even with what we're taught in our faith about how prayers can last for generations. It just doesn't
Yes.
stop, that the prayers carry over. I believe that. And whether people watching or listening believe in prayer or not, that's up to them.
Yes.
But I do think that your story is quite incredible. And even if a person isn't a person of faith, they are going to walk away with something that you said today that can give them hope in the fact that your grandmother, her prayers have covered you even to this day is quite remarkable. I want you to continue to tell your story. Never stop sharing it, no matter how old you get. There may come a point where you think that maybe you're telling your story too much. It doesn't matter. And keep sharing it because it's not a matter of the fact that you gave up. No, it was the opposite. In this world and day and age nowadays, there's so much that could cause a person to just give up.
Yes,
But I want to
absolutely.
use this show and this platform to show people that everybody has a story, everybody, and that everybody's life, no matter how low you think you've gotten, everybody's life is worth it. And yours, Catherine Miller, is certainly worth it. And I am honored to have met such an incredible soul like you. And I speak abundance, prosperity, good health, longevity, joy throughout your entire life. And it was my honor, my absolute honor to have you as a guest on the Power Transformation Podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a beautiful conversation. Like, I also cry when things are really beautiful. So that's the other
Oh,
thing too. So thank you for bringing this out. Thank you for these beautiful questions. Thank you for holding this space, not just for me, but also for all the listeners. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
if you enjoyed today's show, then you don't want to miss an episode. So follow the Power Transformation Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you usually listen, and remember to rate and review. I also invite you to connect with me on social media at Alethea Felton. That's at ALETHEAFELTON. Until next time, remember to be good to yourself and to others.